Okay, so you want to quit pornography. You've probably told yourself this before. You delete the apps, you clear the history, you make the promise at 2 a.m. and mean it completely. Day 1 feels like willpower. Day 3 feels like discipline. And then something happens that you didn't plan for. A bad day, a boring hour, an empty apartment, and you're right back where you started. Except now you also feel like you failed a test that was supposedly just about trying harder. Here's what's not simple about that. The average person who attempts to quit compulsive porn use relapses multiple times before any lasting change sticks. Not because they're weak, but because they're fighting a system that was engineered, quite literally, by people whose job is to make novelty and reward as frictionless as physically possible. This isn't a willpower problem, it's an engineering problem, and nobody hands you the blueprint. This is the mechanics of quitting pornography, and almost nobody who's tried to quit understands what's actually happening underneath it. Let's start from the very beginning. Nobody wakes up one day compulsively using porn. It's built, piece by piece, the same way a casino floor is built. Not by accident, but by design. 3 mechanisms do most of the work. First, the cue. A specific time of day, a specific emotional state, boredom, stress, loneliness, even just being alone with a phone becomes wired to a specific response. This isn't metaphorical. It's a literal neural pathway, strengthened every single time the loop completes. Second, the reward is variable, not fixed. This is the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You don't know exactly what you'll get or when, and that unpredictability is what makes the loop so much stickier than a predictable reward would be. A vending machine that always gives you the same candy bar doesn't get you compulsively checking it. A slot machine does. Third, the dopamine baseline shifts. Repeated high-frequency stimulation doesn't just create a habit, it recalibrates what your brain considers normal stimulation. Over time, ordinary rewards, a conversation, a walk, actual intimacy, start to feel flat by comparison, not because they became less rewarding, but because the baseline moved. Think of it like a building with 3,000 moving parts, except none of them are visible from the outside. You just see, I use this too much. What's actually underneath is cue density, reward variability, and a shifted baseline, 3 separate systems, each reinforcing the other 2. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. The difficulty isn't just neurological, it's commercial. Free, ad-supported, and subscription-based platforms in this space operate on the same attention economy playbook as social media. Infinite scroll, autoplay, algorithmic recommendation engines trained to maximize time on site, not user well-being. The platform doesn't need you to be happy. It needs you to stay. The online adult entertainment industry is estimated to generate tens of billions of dollars annually worldwide, and a meaningful share of that revenue model depends on repeat, high-frequency engagement rather than one-time use, the same underlying business logic as any platform whose revenue scales with time on site. Recommendation algorithms are specifically tuned to surface novel content the instant engagement dips, because novelty is what re-triggers the reward response. This isn't a conspiracy, it's just standard attention economy design, applied to a category where the stakes for the user are higher than they are for a video app. If you're finding this useful so far, this would be a great time to hit subscribe. It helps more people see this. Let's talk about what continuing this actually costs you, day to day. Not morally, mechanically. Time. Sessions compound. What starts as minutes becomes, for people with compulsive patterns, a meaningful chunk of a day, time that isn't available for anything else, week after week, without you ever consciously deciding to spend it that way. Cognitive load. Intrusive thoughts, the mental bandwidth spent resisting or planning around the habit, the low-grade background hum of managing a secret. These all draw on the same finite attention budget you need for work, relationships, and decision-making. Relationships. Compulsive use is consistently linked in clinical literature to reduced relationship satisfaction, and in some cases, difficulty with real-world arousal and intimacy, not because porn itself makes those things impossible, but because a brain calibrated to high-novelty, high-frequency stimulation can find ordinary intimacy comparatively underwhelming. Self-trust. This is the quietest cost and the most corrosive. Every broken promise to yourself, even small private ones nobody else witnesses, erodes your own confidence that your word to yourself means anything. That erosion doesn't stay contained to this one behavior. It leaks into every other goal you set. None of these costs show up on a bank statement. That's exactly why they're so easy to underestimate. Here's where the real leverage is, and it's almost never the thing people try first. Environment redesign. Willpower is a depletable resource. Environment isn't. Content filters, device restrictions, and physically removing the tool of access from the moment of highest vulnerability, usually late at night, alone, remove the loop's first domino before it starts. This single lever does more work than motivation ever will, because it doesn't rely on you being strong in the moment, it removes the moment. Replacement behavior, not suppression. Trying to simply not think about something is famously ineffective. Actively suppressing a thought tends to make it more intrusive, not less. What works is having a specific, pre-decided alternative action ready for the exact cue that used to trigger the habit. A walk, a phone call, a cold shower, a different room. The cue still fires, you just give it a new destination. Habit stacking the replacement. A new behavior sticks dramatically better when it's attached to an existing routine rather than left to float freely. After I feel the urge, I immediately do X is a mechanically stronger structure than I'll try to resist. Delay tactics for cravings. Cravings are not permanent states. They're spikes that reliably peak and fall within roughly 15 to 20 minutes if nothing feeds them. The urge surfing technique, naming the craving, timing it, writing it out without acting or suppressing, works because it teaches your nervous system, through direct repeated evidence, that the wave passes on its own. Accountability structure. People who tell one trusted person and check in regularly show meaningfully better outcomes than people attempting this in total isolation. The mechanism is simple. It converts a private, frictionless decision into a socially visible one, which raises the cost of relapse just enough to matter. Here's what undoes progress. Not one bad day, the story you tell yourself about one bad day. The single most common failure mode isn't the first relapse. It's what happens in the 10 minutes after it, a pattern researchers call the abstinence violation effect. One slip gets reframed internally as total failure, which triggers shame, and shame is one of the most reliable relapse accelerants there is. I already broke my streak, so what's the point now? Turns a 30-second lapse into a multi-day binge. This is the mechanism, plainly. A single deviation is not a system failure. Treating it as one is what actually breaks the system. The people who recover fastest from a slip are the ones who've decided in advance that a lapse is data, not a verdict. Let's put the whole picture together with honest numbers, not the version where you quit forever the first time you decide to, because that's not how this actually goes for most people. The rough case, someone quits with willpower alone, no environment changes, no replacement plan, no accountability. Relapse typically arrives within the first 1 to 2 weeks. It's treated as total failure. Shame drives a longer binge than before. The cycle repeats every 3 to 4 weeks for months, and each cycle erodes self-trust a little further, making the next attempt harder to start, not easier. The strong case, someone removes access at the environmental level in week 1, has a pre-decided replacement behavior ready, and tells one accountability partner. A lapse still happens. It almost always does, often within the first month, but it's treated as a single data point, not a collapse. By week 6 to 8, urges are less frequent and shorter in duration as the baseline begins recalibrating. By month 3, the behavior has shifted from constant fight to occasional maintenance. Same starting point, same brain chemistry. The entire gap between those two outcomes comes down to structure, not character. That gap is the whole video. Quitting pornography was never actually a willpower contest. It only feels that way because willpower is the only lever anyone ever hands you. The people who get free of this treat it the way an engineer treats a system failure. Not, why am I so weak, but which part of this loop can I redesign? Cue, craving, response, reward, every one of those is a point of leverage, and none of them requires you to win a moral battle against yourself at 2 a.m. You were never actually fighting yourself. You were fighting a system built by people who profit from you losing. Once you see it that way, the fight looks completely different. If this helped, subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making content like it.